Service Lab is a community of service design doers and the service design curious. We meet up every few months to share our learnings with each other. Hi everyone, welcome to Service Lab on one of the hottest days of the year. Don't know about you, but we're all melting. I hope some of you are managing to be outside and listening in. But thanks so much for everyone joining us today. For anyone new into Service Lab, we're going to do some quick introductions. So Service Lab is a bi-monthly event for service designers and the service design curious. Very much this time round, we've noticed we've got quite a few new members to our meetup as well, which is great. A lot of people interested in getting involved in service design, so welcome. We bring together various disciplines to kind of share learnings, case studies and practical tools. We've had events in the past about designing inclusively, policy design, behavioural design and many more. Service Lab is run by a small team. Tonight will be hosted by myself and Otla. And just to note to everyone that we are recording this session, and in a couple of weeks it will be up live. We'll do some quick intros to Otla and myself, and then we'll tell you a bit more about the event tonight. So my name is Charlie Pothickery. My preferred pronouns are she and her. I'm a service designer with a focus on designing inclusive services. I started up a small design collective called Inclusively. Myself and a few other freelancers work together to take on projects and freelance roles across the public sector, social enterprises, and quite a bit recently in healthcare. And currently I'm sitting in a mainly white room, got some plants hanging that are moving a little bit in the breeze, which is lovely. And I'm wearing white earrings and have long brown hair. Over to Otla.
Hi everyone. My name is Otla, she, her. I co-organize Service Lab with Charlie. I'm a service designer as well. I work in the public sector area, currently at FisherGov. And I'm currently sitting in my living room, very hot day in London. And I have a couple of very big plants on my background. And I have a fringe and blondish hair. And I'm wearing a black and white pattern dress. Welcome to everyone.
Great. So tonight's event is all about becoming and progressing as a service designer. We also, if we go back a slide, also just to showcase that we've had a couple of recent events, one around the future of service design, and you're able to kind of access that online on YouTube. And another one, our most recent event, was all around health, behavioural science and design. And again, you can find that up on YouTube. And this event will be up on YouTube in a couple of weeks' time as well. So tonight is all about becoming and progressing as a service designer. We really know how difficult it can be to find your first role and move into a new area within your career and work out how to progress within that as well. Within the pandemic, we realised that it can certainly get a bit trickier to do that. So we wanted to try and support our community to share some knowledge and advice with each other as much as possible. So we've got a fantastic group of speakers today, probably the largest amount of speakers that I think we've ever had at Service Lab. I think we're 11 speakers in total. And the agenda looks a bit like this. So we have first got Safiya speaking about some of their kind of recent projects. We've got Watanya speaking about some recent projects. We've got Lydia, Morwenna and Chloe also speaking about some recent projects and what it's like to kind of be graduating and coming into service design from different angles. We've then got a panel discussion with Eve, Amogh and Daniel, which will be facilitated by Katerina, and we'll be covering things like tips for kind of getting into your ideal service design role. We'll be learning about their personal journeys, and there'll be lots of times for everyone to kind of ask questions to them as well, so that we can all learn from what their experience has been like and some of those kind of tips. We then, to wrap up, have a fantastic talk from Not Only But Also by Maddi and Guy, and this will be really focused on kind of tips and resources and what it's like when you're thinking about coming out from university and all of the different avenues that you could end up exploring, service design being one of them. So without further ado, we're going to pass on to our first fantastic speaker, Safiya. Safiya is a freelance graphic designer, educator, and is also one quarter of Ricebox Studio, a design practice that uses creative tech and visual communication for social good. Safiya is going to be talking to us today about the Red Cloud Project, a period education campaign. So I'm now going to pass over to Safiya. And Safiya, if you're able to just give us a quick introduction to yourself, what your preferred pronouns are, and a quick visual description, that'd be amazing.
Yes, hello, thank you for that lovely intro. Yeah, as Charlie mentioned, hi, my name is Safiya. My pronouns are she, her, and visual description, I'm wearing a grey headscarf, got grey headphones, and there's a white background, just plain white background. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Safiya, and I'm a freelance graphic designer, educator, and 1/4 of Ricebox Studio. And my practice focuses on inclusive social design, editorial, publication, and I have a specific interest within design education. So who is Ricebox Studio? Ricebox Studio is a design studio founded in April 2020. Bristy and Maria are also here. They'll probably say hello in the chat. But our main practice is to use creative tech and visual communication to make the world a better place. So as Charlie mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about the Red Cloud Project. So super quickly, briefly, how we got here is that all four of us, Ricebox Studio, we studied and graduated from UAL Camberwell BA Graphic Design in 2019. And so after graduating, we were hired by CRIN, which is Child Right International Network, to pilot a design fellowship for 6 months. And so within that, we developed a period education campaign called the Red Cloud Project. And this was a massive project. Like, this included an educational book, workshops, and interactive printing machine, which we were really lucky enough to showcase at Tate Modern for International Women's Day. Super quickly, that is like the cover of the book. It's a blue cover and has like a cloud that's just like holding drops of red drops. And it says "From Your Big Sister." And yeah, there you go, it's playing. The educational book "From Your Big Sister" is designed to break the shame and stigma around menstruation. So it contains chapters around know your body and your period, a maze of period products out there, and the direct and indirect effects of period poverty. And to sort of avoid regurgitating the plethora of useful information available there, we also included reflective activities and exercises to provoke conversation, and to kind of help the reader understand the content from their own unique perspective. Because the main thing is we didn't want to impose our point of view. Finally, we also have crowdsourced stories from around the world in order to share experiences of other folks out there. So we have like positive stories, but a few harrowing stories, but all with the aim of sharing experiences to connect us all. So this project has allowed us to speak also to many religious leaders and theologians to help contextualize how menstruation sits within respective religions. We were also able to interview many period activists from around the world in order to inspire people of any age and background to fight back and support sustainable and accessible periods for all. So on the slide is just a GIF of like different pages from our book, which if you want, you can have a look at redcloudproject.co.uk. The website is in a beta phase at the moment, by the way. But yeah. There we go, I'm gonna play it. So the period cloud, which is part of the Red Cloud Project, this is an interactive printing machine, and it provides factual information on menstrual health, period poverty, crowdsourced stories, and positive stories of menstruation across cultures and religions. So the idea is that the user simply presses the button and they get a receipt, which teaches them something about periods. And the aim is to encourage discussions around periods and to open up the conversation as much as possible. All the content are extracts from the educational book, From Your Big Sister, and we were really lucky because the period cloud was showcased at Tate Modern for International Women's Day 2020. So the period cloud is like this sort of like wooden white period cloud, and it has like 5 buttons on it. It's got a little LCD screen and a little receipt printer as well. So to continue our aim to tackle period poverty and stigma, we designed and built a series of period positive Instagram filters to help open up the conversation around menstruation, but specifically on a public platform like Instagram. If you would like to go, you can visit our Instagram just here. So using the filters that we created, we also made a digital campaign. So we asked our friends and families and followers to kind of share period-related experiences, kind of favorite products, self-care tips, just to all open up the conversation and break the taboo around periods. This is an ongoing campaign, and you can have a look at it on our Instagram as well. This was genuinely a humongous project, and if anyone is interested in hearing more, please feel free to reach out to us. That's our Ricebox details. This is my details, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to all the other people that they're not here. They're here with us, but they're not presenting from your studio. Just move it to the other screen so actually I can see you. It's been great presentation. As I mentioned in the chat, any questions, do drop them in the chat. I know they take sometimes also to warm up. So if you think about anything, want to follow up with Ricebox, I think we can put also some of their details in the chat. Is there anything that you have not had the chance to share in the presentation, or kind of future plan that you would like to share?
The thing I didn't share was the book was really, really humongous. But the thing is, a huge part of that was kind of a peer review. We had many people peer review the book as well, specifically students and children. And we got a huge amount of really useful and brutally honest criticism, which I think was really important for us to involve the people that you're designing for, which is a really good learning lesson for literally anyone in any industry.
That's great. And in terms of future plans or particular hopes?
I think currently we're just expanding the digital campaign. If anyone wants to be involved, that would be great. But yeah, we constantly are doing work around the topic of menstruation. We do have something interesting coming up with augmented reality and kind of period products and their evolution. I'm not going to say too much, but we're super excited about that too.
That's great. We have actually a question in the chat that's kind of reflecting also on the offline solution, and also kind of parallel to the kind of app and the digital one. And the question is around, how did you get to the idea of also kind of exploring the offline solution?
Yeah, I think that was one of the components of so when we were hired by Child Right International Network, they wanted something physical, something that is inviting to people to sort of kind of step into the idea of menstrual education and sort of step into learning about it. And the main thing that we wanted to do was put it in, ideally, we'd want it to have the period cloud to be in Waterloo Station or something like that. Obviously, this was pre-pandemic where everyone could touch everything freely. But we definitely wanted something public that would get people interested, and then they could kind of go on and do more research sort of thing. So that was the idea, just give you a little taster and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't know about that, and learning something in a kind of non-confrontational way. Yeah.
Right. That's very interesting. Thank you so much. Good luck with this project. Go for it, Charlie.
What's it been like as a kind of process of starting up Ricebox Studio?
It was a mad process. It was because we graduated, we got hired by the fellowship, and it's when the fellowship ended, which was in March 2020, we were we actually really love working together. And we felt like there is no reason not to continue to work together. And I think that was it. We were like, it's a pandemic, so let's just do it. What's going to happen? And alhamdulillah, touch wood, it's been 1 year since we've had our studio. And it's just been growing, and it's been great to work on projects that we really care about and using creative tech and social goods. And especially being women of color, which there's not many, we're just trying to be out there and do our thing, basically.
If you could give one bit of advice or tip to anyone that is recently graduated or anyone that's thinking about starting up a studio, what do you think it might be?
I'll say it is scary, I'm not gonna lie, but one tip that we did is that we have a board of advisors. And this is just literally the people that we recognize that helped us during university, people we've worked with, people that we kind of see, oh, this is where we want to get to. And literally ask people, we were literally like, would you like to be on our board of advisors? We will give you food in exchange for advice. And people will help you. You'll be super surprised by how forthcoming people can be with their advice. And everyone just wants to help people, hopefully, at the end of the day. So we have an amazing board of advisors that we go to whenever we're a bit stuck or we want to progress in a certain way we don't know how to get to.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Safiya. Big round of applause for Safiya. That was
fantastic.
On to our next speaker then. So next we've got Jean Watanya, who is a service designer who creates services to enhance user experience through multidisciplinary design. Jean focuses on people-centered approaches with an awareness of the social impact, and Jean is very passionate about storytelling and visual communication. And before service design, she had a profound design background in architecture and in a fashion label. And Jean is a recent MA service design graduate from UAL and is going to be talking us through her major project, PAL Plan. So I'll hand over to Jean now. And Jean, if you can give us a brief description of yourself, a visual description, and also state your preferred pronouns, that'd be great.
Hi everyone, I'm Jean. I'm she, her, a service designer with a focus on user experience and visual communication with a background of architecture and a founder of fashion label. And I'm a short hair girl wearing a multicolored top, sitting in my bedroom on a sunny day in London. Yeah, that's me. So as I recently graduated my Master's of Service Design from UAL, I'm becoming a service designer. So today I'm going to talk you through my final major project, which is called PAL Plan, a travel platform providing pre-planned itineraries to discover travel ideas to Thailand. So the slides are in the form of my portfolio as a guideline for those who are becoming a service designer or interested in the process. So first thing first, why travel and why Thailand? Okay, I'm Thai and I picked the project according to my interest. And I started this project last year in May 2020, when we are in the middle of the pandemic and we are struggling with the travel restrictions and the lockdown. So when talking about Thailand, it's a small country with amazing food and famous for tourism. So tourism also makes up almost 20% of the country's GDP. So what's happened when foreign tourists cannot travel to Thailand? So people lost their jobs and many small business closed down. So these are the initial problems that I found. So after a day's research and literature reviews, I moved to the research activities, which are the online surveys. So I asked people, how do they feel about traveling right now, and what they wish to have during the travel, and what are their pain points before and during the COVID. And I also conduct cultural probes with my participant, Thai travelers. And I do one-to-one interview with people in the tourism industry, like independent business owner, touring company, or even community enterprise, because I would like to focus on like a smaller sector, like local tourism. So after I gather all the findings and insights, there are two significant insights that I'm going to work on here. First is how can Thai tourism don't only rely on foreign tourists, and become more resilient, and how we encourage Thai people with ability to spend to domestic travel more so we can recover our business. So after that, I conduct an ideation workshop with participants using brainwriting and to generate ideas according to problems and potential solutions. And here we are, the concept after we have a workshop. I came up with the two concepts. The first one is from we approach the travel with food, like a food trip. Another is like a trip organizer. So after I taste the concept with the 8 participants, the majority voted for the second option, which is a tools to help them travel better and discover more ideas for traveling. So on the right hand, it's my first prototype in a low fidelity design. I sketched my main touch point over an application because it's suitable for carrying around with you during the trip, like before the trip and also during the trip. So it's the main touch point. So after that, I moved to the high fidelity design. I put all the design on the Marvel website, and then I can send it out to the participants in Thailand because all the project I do remotely from London actually. And here we are, the service concept, Power Plan. It's a travel platform for you to discover more travel ideas, like you can trigger yourself to go out and travel. It's pretty simple to use our service in 3 steps. The first thing, you just explore like alternative travels idea in the platform from others. And secondly, you build your own pre-planned itineraries. And lastly, you share and exchange your travel trips and reviews with other in the platforms. So the service is for Thai travelers and the service providers. The service act as a bridge to connect them to like meet the demand and supply to recover the business and tourism. So my service, the touch points is actually both online and offline. So we provide the support like front stage, backstage support for both target user and service provider. And for the offline service, we also connect with the Google Maps, local independent shops. And to summarize, it's pretty challenging to put the service design project in the portfolio because it's a long process and it's not a linear. So I actually have a lot more to share with you, but I just need to pick some favorite wireframes to show you here as a showcase in the portfolio. So I think it's my advice, it's better to show like all the skills, all the design tools that you use, that you experience for the recruiters to see in your portfolio. And it's nice to have both portfolio on website and PDF one as well. Yeah, that's all for me.
That sounds amazing. If anyone has any questions in the chat, I think I have a question. I also wanted to, adding for you to add another comment that you didn't have the chance to add in the presentation. But I was just curious about recruitment of people in Thailand and how did you do that? Kind of like selecting and recruiting people abroad.
So I actually started from people around me first. It's not that fair because it's like people with the same, interest with me, but it's like expanding to like different type of travelers more and more with some connections. So I try to like reach out to like different people. So I'm in the design industry. So people, they have quite a niche kind of travel lifestyle anyway. So they kind of find like new things to explore. And then I move forward to their friend of friends. And I have some contact from my colleague friends that they have a business right now, like the owner of the shops, of the resorts. So I reach out to more and more people in a wider network.
Great. I think it's such a challenging thing to recruit remotely and especially if you're doing something also across different countries and everything. So that's brilliant. That's very useful. We have some nice comments on the portfolio that just showed, and also a question on what was the kind of like most challenging bit.
I think the most challenging is because it's remote and it's a travel where we are not used to it anymore, like traveling, because like we're sitting at home. So I try to like, offer and innovate some new traveling platform, and people cannot really imagine because right now you cannot even go out. You don't have a mood to like plan for the trips. So I think it's quite challenging when I communicate to people and we are not sitting in the same place. I need to make a lot of like visual, for example, like just a mock-up, but I just need to make like a proper like graphics like with an icon. So when I communicate with them, they can like recognize my service because it's such a long thing and people don't really like focus like what are you talking thinking about for such a long time. So yeah, I think that's challenging, that you need to let your participant to imagine what is going to happen next.
That's great. That's great. I'm aware of time. There are a couple of other questions in the chat. If you have time and you want to reply, one is one around portfolio and how did you kind of choose what to prioritize, what to put or not in the portfolio, and another one about your project. So you can answer to that in the chat would be great. I guess we can just move to the next speaker. It's been super useful to both hear about your experience as well as looking at portfolio and how you structured that, and especially in such a challenging moment of running a remote workshop and remote in general projects. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, Jean. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Really
so
beautiful
much.
as well. So next up, we've got a trio of speakers. So we've got Lydia, Morwenna and Chloe, who have recently graduated from Kingston University. I was lucky enough to see some of the early stages of this work when I was doing some kind of tutoring for Kingston Uni. So I'm really excited to see how it's turned out. But they're going to be telling us about SO, a service facilitating green activity in Barking and Dagenham. So I'll pass over to them. And again, if you're able to do a quick introduction to yourselves, visual description and your preferred pronouns, that'd be brilliant.
My preferred pronouns are she and her. I'm a white woman with brown hair wearing a navy blue jacket, and I'm sat in front of some flowery wallpaper.
I'm Morwenna, she, her. I'm wearing a black shirt and I'm in a cream room with some bags behind me.
Hi, I'm Chloe Hulse. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white woman with blonde hair speaking in front of a wooden door and wearing a blue top.
So we're really excited to be showing a recent collaborative project called SO, which we did during our third year of graphic design at Kingston. So we were tasked with choosing a specific London community and finding a way to sustain and improve their long-term health. After a lot of research, we became interested in Barking and Dagenham due to its high obesity rate, a lower life expectancy than the London average, and the highest IMD score in the city. Additionally, we noticed that there was a general lack of green space in its highly populated areas. We came across a 2018 study involving 290 million people, which showed that spending time in natural green spaces reduces the risk of many health conditions, including heart disease, obesity, and stress, to name a few. We can see the value of green health through our social prescription service, which is already trying to link people to the outdoors through the NHS. Our design solution for Barking and Dagenham is SO, a bespoke and inclusive green social prescription service. It supports GP-prescribed patients, self-prescribed individuals or groups, and the link worker professionals who currently orchestrate social prescription. It is unique in that it aims to be preventative as well as curative, so it operates through tech or non-tech user journeys in order to cater for all residents of all ages and abilities. So in order to quickly summarise the way it works, SO relies upon a physical and media campaign to reach out to those who might wish to self-prescribe, whilst patients will be directed to SO through their GP. Using either our app or printed materials which will recreate the experience, individuals, community groups, or schools and care homes can be linked to outdoor green activities which suit their preferences and their capabilities. Additionally, link workers can use our app to better manage their clients and health records.
So, how are we going to design a viable community project over the course of 2 national lockdowns? When we started this project back in October, this was a real concern of ours. However, digital tools and communication allowed us to push past these physical barriers to make us feel as connected to the community as possible. We used email, phone calls, and Zoom like never before to set up a network of experts who either represented the community, had insight into social prescription, or were specialists in green health. Having them on hand, both in research and user testing phases, was unbelievably helpful. For example, Judith Ish-Horowitz is a trailblazer in intergenerational projects and taught us the importance of bringing older and younger groups together through gardening initiatives. These are some of the activities that we are now proposing to introduce. This is one of our chats with the local social prescription service manager, Jackie Hutchison. We were able to digitally use a test throughout the project with help from classmates, visiting lecturers like Charlie, and the direct user groups from our pool of experts. Miro was undoubtedly a godsend. In a similar way to co-designing with our experts, we really wanted to be able to co-design with the Barking and Dagenham community to form our visual identity. Whilst hindered from carrying out local workshops during the third lockdown, we attempted to co-design amongst our own local communities, so family and friends, to send in nature-based illustrations. These eventually formed our brand and would theoretically appear all over the borough as co-created wayfinding to our allotment sites or even animated digital adverts.
So after setting up this foundation of contacts, user research and testing, we then set about visualising the deliverables of our service in a location that we weren't allowed to visit. We proposed a multimedia campaign to advertise So, with printed, digital and social media outcomes, using So stories to show how the service has impacted people's lives. Our social media campaign also shares local updates and the array of green activities available, making links to our website and app. Our tech journey is So's primary tool and something that we want to encourage as many users as possible to utilise through its inclusive and easy to use design. The So website offers a clear explanation of So's system and user experience and ultimately encourages interested parties to download the app. Our app is designed as accessibly as possible, using only AAA colour combinations and type sizes suitable for those with eyesight impairments. One of our experts, Joanne Ellis, is a social prescription link worker. Listening to her criticisms of existing social prescription tools allowed us to develop a link worker side to the app, which would improve their ability to make referrals, manage patients, and know what community activities were available. It was really important to us that we were supporting all abilities and age ranges, since our user personas are so broad. As well as using printed materials, the non-tech journey is more reliant on human support and guidance from a link worker. We came up with the concept of So allotment sheds, which would act as community hubs, documenting local activities and having So representatives on hand for interested visitors. They would be painted by the community and allow people who need that human guidance to speak to someone about the service. The printed user journey attempts to replicate the So user experience through materials like information sheets, appointment cards, and calendars, all guided by phone or physical meetings with the link workers. Thank you all very much for listening, and if anybody has any questions, we'd love to answer them.
Thank you so much. I think there's been some lovely comment in the chat about the presentation and how you were very, you made a brilliant job in kind of like delivering the presentation and kind of like putting it together, giving with this natural feeling. I think we have a question coming from Natalia that is, so she's talking about working with an ecotherapy service at the moment, and one of the challenges that she's encountering is that they are managing in onboarding process, and they're also kind of like taking into consideration digital exclusion. How did you kind of like include this in your process, or how did you adapt it to this?
So that was something we were really conscious of as well. We spoke to Jackie, who was one of the link workers, some GPs, and they brought up a similar problem. So what we really tried to do is, through our non-tech journey, it would have kind of local points of service. So that would be through our allotment sheds, and they were kind of scattered all over the borough in theory. So that anyone that was experiencing travel restrictions or just didn't really know where to start, that was somewhere physical that they could actually go. And there was always that point of the GP, like if there's someone that really needs the service, the GP is always there to kind of create that connection with the link worker, which is, you know, an ongoing service now that we wanted to really kind of mesh ourselves into and provide them with that printed user journey instead that would kind of replicate everything that was going on in the app. Yeah.
Right, that's great. I think it covers a little bit also the following question about choosing the app to facilitate the user journey. But it would be great if you can take a moment, if you want to answer to also to that specific question about app in kind of like picking the app to facilitate the user journey, as well as a question around how do you see the project growing. Unfortunately, we have time just for one question, but thank you so much, all of you, for the great presentation. I think we are moving into the panel of discussion. So thank you so much to all the speakers so far that took the time to share a lovely project that you've been working on. So we are moving into the second part of our event, and the second part is going to be focused on a panel discussion. We have 3 lovely speakers, and handing over to Katerina to introduce the speakers, and if you can also introduce yourself, that will facilitate the panel discussion.
Hello everyone, my name is Katerina Shikhotova. I am a service designer at CIPD. My pronoun are she, her. I have light brown hair and wearing a white shirt and glasses. There is a bit of gray chair behind me and a beige wall. I would like to thank Service Lab for the opportunity to facilitate this panel discussion and for organizing this event in such an inclusive way. That's wonderful. And let me introduce our amazing speakers today. The first one, Amok Lux. He's a service designer at Arrival. He helps create mobility products and services that provide opportunities to empower communities and that enable an easier shift to a sustainable future. Amok completed his MA in service design from the RCA last year, where he worked on a project with the World Bank and Government of Zambia. The next speaker is Georgieva, a senior service designer at the Scottish Government. Eve is helping design social security services, focusing on assistance that supports children and young people with disability, as well as their families. She is a trustee with 2050 Climate Group, mentors young people via MCR Pathways program, and before this, she was at Police Scotland and Snook. And last but not least, Daniel Tuitt. He is a freelance service and business designer. Daniel is a corporate misfit and a catalyst for change, for challenges people face across the real world. For the last decade, he has inspired large organizations, social enterprises, and startups to think differently, such as BSA, Monzo, Lego, Ministry of Justice, and many more. He writes, talks, lives, and inspires all things creative. He is also an experienced facilitator and business coach. So, dear speakers, could you now briefly introduce yourself, state your preferred pronoun, give visual description, and tell us how you ended up being service designers? Amok, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here. So my name is Amok Lux, and I just finished my master's at the Royal College of Art about a year ago and jumped straight into a really interesting service design challenge at Arrival that's making electric vehicles. We have a bus, a car, and a van. Pronouns are he, him. I'm sitting in a very hot room with not enough ventilation. Behind me are some chitange fabrics from Zambia, where my parents live now.
I can go next if that's okay. Yeah. Hi there. My name is Daniel Tuitt. As the poorly worded description of myself says, I work as a service and business designer. I work across a number of different organizations. I identify as a he, his. I am Black, African, Caribbean descent, long dreads past my chest. I've got an Arsenal shirt in the background, which I'm not proud of sometimes. And I'll probably give myself a 5 out of 10 in terms of looks. A 4 if I don't have enough sleep, and 5.5 if there's alcohol involved. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
I'm Eve, and my pronouns are she, they. I couldn't figure out how to blur my background so you can see the rest of my living room. Cables, projector, books. I'm wearing a white top and brown hair. I'm white, and I've got a Bulgarian accent going on. I am a senior service designer at Scottish Government, and I ended up in service design after graduating in 2014, which seems a long time ago now. So please don't guess my age. And I started working at Snook on communication campaigns as a intern through Adopt an Intern program. And then so it was learning on the job for me.
Great, thank you for your stories and for your introductions. So moving on to the first question. You shared your stories, and could you share some tips for someone trying to land their dream service design role? Tips and tricks. Who would like to go first now?
I can take a shot at that, just because I'm very close to having tried to do that. I guess personally, I feel that it's really important to feel empowered in whatever role you pick. And my number one tip, well, I have two tips. First one is tons of research. I think design research comes really handy in finding a role. Teaches you a lot about the landscape. And the second one is just talking to a lot of people. I know a lot of you have heard of ADP lists and things like that. But yeah, I think just having conversations with lots of people who are doing things that you want to do gives you a really good idea of what you really want to do. And yeah, that helped me a lot.
And Daniel and Eve, maybe you can share from your experience or from people who you maybe hired recently.
Yeah, I've got a couple of tips. So I switched careers. So I come from social science background into service design and kind of like learning as I go. So if you're switching from another role or industry sphere into service design, from experience, finding a job that matches your current skill set within an organization that does service design has been extremely helpful, because if you learn as you're doing, like me, then you can figure out if you like it and if you're a good fit in a sort of safer environment. I had to do it because I couldn't really do training and courses because they don't have money for that. So for that option has been great. And another one, when I was in the lead role in Police Scotland, I met randomly at an event a student who was in their final year at Glasgow School of Art, and they were doing their thesis and dissertation. So I'd really recommend, if you're in that space, to look for real life challenges within organizations and connect with those people. So that person connected with me during an event on service design. We chatted about Police Scotland, and then they were like, "Can I do my thesis with you?" And I was like, "That's fantastic." So finding those motivated people within those organizations has been really helpful. So I embedded that person within Police Scotland for 4 months, found them a desk, and they literally did fantastic work that we both benefited from. And now they're actually also senior service designer at Scottish Government. So hopefully they landed their dream job. I don't know, I haven't asked them, but that's been super beneficial.
So it's, if we summarize it, it's ongoing learning, collaboration, and networking, right? Daniel, do you have something to add?
Yes. The great thing about being last is everyone's taken up all the best ideas. But to just add on that, I completely agree with what everyone said. Something that's a little bit different is, do not just search for a role that says service design. Really look at the skill sets that you want to develop and you think you can apply to the role. And your role might not necessarily be service design, but it's the mindset, it's the skills, it's the common language, it's the way that you create value from a holistic, high level and a very narrowed down, complex, close way of thinking. I think that's more important than just roles. There's a lot of service design roles out there that aren't really service design, really narrowed down around the skills, and also try to work closely with people that are really good at service design. I think what's great about this community is we're all here to support each other. And I know one of my key principles is how can we teach, inspire people to do great service design? And that comes in many different forms, depending on the organization as well. So just to summarize that again, don't look for the role of service design, try to look at the skill sets that you're trying to apply and also the mindset, if that helps at all.
Yeah, that's a wonderful tip. So we can move to the next question. That is kind of continue our previous one. Any advice on how to progress as a service designer when you already landed your first job? And maybe you can explain what progressing actually means for you. maybe to be fair, Daniel, do you want to be first this time?
That's fine. So I'll start with your second question. In terms of progression, that means your ability to add value to projects, work on more complex projects over time, and get a wider voice around supporting service design around organization. Or I always see progression within different organizations, whether you're working in a startup, agency, government, or a traditional brand organization, is that how can you move away from service design as just a resource and focus more on it being a core part of what the organization does? And you need to be really critical around that. Now I'm more senior / lead service design in some project working. Probably 50, maybe 60% of my role is convincing people and communicating the value of service design. I think that's so valuable. So it becomes less around how things look, the artifacts, the service blueprints, yada, 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 but moving more into how do you convince different stakeholders across the organization the value of service design. And maybe they might be using other words, but making sure that they're part of the conversation, and you're getting their voice and you're convinced them at a senior level. That's it from me.
I think I have a similar issue now, similar challenge. And Amok or Eve, who's next?
I'd love to go next. I guess this is kind of where I am right now, where I'm thinking about these things, and couldn't agree more with Daniel. I think more particularly for the space I'm in, there's a lot of learning curves with what service design is, what it can do. And internally, I always have an existential crisis in terms of what is this really? And I think where the value really comes out is building not just short-term project relationships, but really identifying how what you're doing, especially in an organization, is adding value to whatever work stream, whatever product's being developed. And I think once you can really listen to the needs and deliver something to that, you start building a more, I guess, long-term relationship. So projects keep growing, more people get involved, and that feels like real progress to me. And that's kind of what I'm chasing right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with with all of what was said so far. And I feel like for me, like progressing as a service designer has meant doing much less sexy work and becoming comfortable with that, especially for me working in government. Nothing is sexy in what we do, and nothing is pretty. And especially coming to the mindset of like allowing some things past, and letting some of the swim fish through. Like you can be a perfectionist and things like that. But yeah, for me, it's also been progression in terms of managing people, recruiting and setting up teams. For example, when I was working in the police and developing like mini cultures within massive bureaucratic organizations, has been like definite realization for me, like, oh, I've progressed through my career at that stage. Yeah, on like how to progress for me personally, when I started from junior level, even like in the outskirts of service design, throughout going towards mid-level for like a couple of years, I was doing lots of things outside work, and that's like what really helped me. So I was gathering all of this extra experience through volunteering. I was working on side projects. I was joining boards, mentoring people, joining other advisory boards, and freelancing on developing tech stuff. So that was like a really, really useful way to also progress on some of my other skills. And also recently having a career coach has been like one of the best things. And I cannot recommend it enough. And by career coach, I also mean something more informal, maybe in your current job, or where you are, or within your service design community. You see someone who's doing great work and you're like, I just want to touch base and see how they do it. And they teach you. I've had people looking over my shoulder as I'm writing emails, teaching me how to communicate things. So that's been also super helpful in terms of progression.
Thank you for sharing. It seems like really useful tips. So you mentioned quite abstract things like building relationships, communicating value of service design, or managing people. And if I think about building my portfolio, how can I show this, and what really the portfolio should show?
I can go first, but I think I have a controversial opinion. I don't have personally a portfolio, and I just have I've recently switched to a Word document because I found it's the easiest way to convey what I do. And at some point in my life, I designed the website, and then I realized everyone just wanted a CV. So for me personally, it's always just been the content and showing something you've made happen. So not showing like the whole process of like how to get there, but what did you make happen in terms of whether that's impact or working with an organization to achieve something, and being really succinct about that thing. So thinking about, I guess, digging into your research skills, thinking about who's reading your portfolio and how many other portfolios they're reading. And do you just need a 2-pager Word document instead? But I know it's controversial. Just throwing it out there.
Quite interesting.
I was going to say
it would work for. Sorry, Daniel.
I was going to say I'm so happy you said that, because I'm exactly the same. I've got a PDF deck and a deck I just update now and then, and I've got an old website, but please, no one search for the website. Famous last words, everyone's going to search for it now, but it's so much better just to have a copy or something that's editable rather than a website. So I agree with you, Eve.
Do you think it also works for people in junior also who is looking for the first role, or it's for such experienced people like you?
I think it depends. It's so competitive for an entry-level role at the moment within service design, but at the same time, service design is just exploding. I'm a freelancer myself, and I get messages probably every other day asking me if I'm interested in a role. My advice to anyone that's junior is, rather than focusing on your website that no one will really look at, or let's say a recruiter would spend 10 seconds max looking through it, build up your network. The service design community is amazing. Just think about the service labs, what they're doing. I'd say spend more time working on your human skills rather than your actual hard skills as a designer, because I think that will pay dividends in the future.
Okay, thank you.
That's just my
maybe you have a different opinion here.
I mean, I don't think what you said, Eve, was controversial, but I definitely took a very different approach. I had keynotes, I had my website, I almost started blogging, and I had different versions of my projects of how I'd show to people. And I think the one thing I realized was the portfolio is really important. It evidences what you can do. But going to what Daniel said, I think that human aspect is almost more important. It's like the portfolio supported conversations I was having, and the conversation is what started something and went somewhere. But I think if I think as a recent graduate, and now looking at potentially hiring people, I'd love to see service design projects that show the process, kind of like the projects before this. I think there's a lot of meat in the thinking and how you problem solve, and the directions you take, and that's what really gives you your personality and your design flavor. And I think that's really important to showcase in the portfolio, which is very tough. I think, how do you do that? I don't know. Yeah.
So it seems it really depends on your situation and on your projects and your skills. And depending on that, you can choose the way how you present yourself, or just through text as Eva, or through the portfolio as Amok.
That's great. I think it's been an interesting conversation so far. As I wrote in the chat, if you have questions for any of the panelists here, to drop them in the chat. Something that is already happening that I would like to happen even a little bit more is to, if you have any resources of things that you would like to recommend people to read, to look at, to take part in. I can see there are a couple of comments about mentoring, for example, where to find that. If you find that anything was very useful for you and you feel like writing in the chat, that would be great. We're also trying to do a little bit of this in the in the conversation that we're having right after, but it would be great also to kind of outsource and crowdsource a little bit of that. I guess the kind of like looking at the chat, and a couple of things that came up is about also how, one question is about what are the main skills to demonstrate as a service designer, and how do you how to do it without a portfolio. So if you don't have that portfolio to back you up, what it would be a way to show that?
I can jump in here. I think it's been mentioned before, but your thinking as well. So trying to be a strategic designer for me is always key, because I've had to recruit junior and mid-level service designers in the past, and they can create fantastic artifacts. But when I ask them around the process, how they manage complex conversations to get people on board, that's when sometimes they fall short. So I would say some of the key skills will be how to manage really senior stakeholders, or manage multiple different stakeholders together to create something rather than just doing it yourself.
Yeah, and I'll just add to this. When I've been hiring, we'll typically look for any work around identifying user needs or challenges and working with organizations to help them this, and then the communications skills aspect to this related to maybe facilitation, having conversations, or translating any technical information and communicating that to others. And by technical, I mean it might be a policy, or it might be anything related to, I don't know, period poverty, as we heard before with Safiya. So yeah, how do you work with different people to explain different concepts?
Thinking on a practical aspect from what you were saying, would that then kind of like showing through the CV some of this collaboration and kind of like lateral thinking? I can see some noddings. I think it was interesting as well that you kind of like all answer to this question in slightly different ways, before from the portfolio as well as now, like what is important to show. And I guess it also depends a lot on the type of organization that you're applying for, as well as the type of team and what are the skills that are needed for that team. If it's a whole service designer team and I'm an addition to that, or if it's, as we were saying before as well, as like when you need to like have a lot of buy-in, you need to also explain what actually service design is. We had a couple of questions about seniority and about like jobs available. It's also a difficult random time in life, but a couple of comments were about kind of like having more senior roles available in job openings for seniors rather than for junior mid, and kind of like what is then the way to get into mid or kind of like into service design if you're junior, and also kind of like what is like to move from user experience into service design.
I'll answer. I feel like there are a few questions in there. But in terms of the switch up between different professions, I actually started off as a fine artist, and I don't know how I ended up working in a startup environment, helping them raise funds, which opened me up to what I didn't know was service design at that time. And I think in terms of switching, what really helped, at least made me feel more confident, was having that, getting some experience under my belt, and having projects that actually delivered something using a lot of processes. So why do you use stakeholder maps or whatever artifacts? And then what is it achieving? I think building that bank of those things made switching almost seamless, and your past almost is like a valuable addition to what you're setting out to do.
I can add some thoughts around the whole challenges around an entry level versus senior. And I've been speaking to a lot of other senior service designers, some that are even partner level as well. It'd be great to have a dialogue with the rest of the panelists. But I think at this stage, because service design is growing so rapidly, a lot of organizations, I'm talking about agencies and normal organizations that have in-house teams, the big challenge is they want to have a core of senior level service designers first before they hire entry level designers, so they get the level of support, because I'm not too sure about everyone else's expertise and experience. But when you jump into a service design project, it can be very complex. It can be very draining emotionally. It can be very impactful as well, depending on what you're working on. I'm still surviving from some really tough, challenging projects in the past, but enough about that. But that's one of the challenges. I think there will be more entry roles later on, but most people are trying to get the senior level in and get that support in after from the entry levels. Also, I've said this before, don't just look for entry level service design roles. Look for companies that do really good service design and try and look for junior roles there. And I think that's another way to get into service design, being around amazing practitioners around service design. That's pretty much almost as good as having an entry level service design role, because you can learn from them, you can get involved, you can ask questions.
Yeah, I agree. And I wonder if there's something around the more formal versus informal ways of applying, especially thinking about consultancies and more like agency style of working, which is not so much of like where I work just now in the public sector. But when I was working in agencies, for example, we would hire loads of juniors and entry-level service designers from more informal paths. So let's say someone bumped into someone else at an event, or people proactively sending us videos of like why they want to work with us, and we find them interesting, have an interview, and then go from there without us advertising the roles. But when it comes to senior roles, it seems like a more formal way of recruitment. And then agree with what Daniel was saying, especially now in the public sector, I see us recruiting quite a lot because we need to get the ground running immediately. Like as of yesterday, we needed to do something and deliver something. So that's why I guess you might be seeing more of these. But if you're looking at private sector, try and approach directly, because some of these connections seem to happen more informally there. I hope that's useful.
I think it is, or precisely, I think it is. There are also some comments in the chat about kind of like suggestions and also each type of size of organization to look for at the beginning, or kind of like it was interesting points about kind of like building your experience a little bit in other like similar sectors, so that you can also build up your experience to arrive there. I think that there was an interesting point kind of looking then at further states around seniority and about how far can you go. So what does it mean actually being a very senior service design? What does it mean progress in that sense? Is it about doing more design direction? Is it more about project management? I mean, I guess it depends pretty much on where you are. But I think that it's quite interesting also the idea of like also how far can you go?
Such an easy question. So there's a lot to unpack in that question alone. It's really interesting. So one part I really want to dive into is how far can you go within service design? And it all depends on the maturity of your organization, and are you sticking just to service design as a role? Because I see service design as a mindset, if that makes sense. So you can be the head of product, you can be the head of experience, but if you've got a service design background, and I know a lot of, because I work with a lot of startups that have that service design mindset as well. So we can just gel, and they've got different roles, but they still understand it. When you get to that senior leadership, VP level, it's less around being the head of service design, because that's going to be a rare role, especially as service design matures. But it's really trying to figure out what principles, what mindset, what vision of leadership are you trying to expand across the organization you're working with. And that can vary, because small agencies have a completely different way of working to government, to private sector, etc., etc.
I think it's an interesting point. It would be great to hear also, since both Amog and Eve, you come from different kind of environments. What are your takeaways on this?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Eve, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Daniel. You go as far as it goes up. And also, especially in public sector where I am, that might not mean that you're like, your title is head of service design or deputy director of design. You know, it might be something else because you've picked up quite a lot of other skills. I think progression means, like, especially when it goes to like as far as maybe like a lead service designer, quite a lot of the things you'll be doing are more strategy, team management, aligning things was less like you become more of a managerial role. So you're stepping into other spheres as well, like you can do other things. So I think, yeah, the role becomes more flexible as you go up the tree.
Yeah, I mean, just to go off that point, this is something I've been thinking about. It feels like with a lot of design disciplines, you have this way of progressing into the craft where you get and become an expert, a master craftswoman, or you go the other way, which becomes leadership focus, people management focus. But I see with service design, it's almost that people management, stakeholder engagement is always a big part. So I'm wondering in terms of how far you can take it. It feels like it's almost up to you to make that happen for yourself, which is not a great answer, but I don't see it any other way at this stage. How do you guys feel about that?
I think we're open up to a really big topic, and I think that they were all brilliant answers. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. There are also some more questions. I know that we're getting driving to the end, but if you have any more thoughts or comments or answering to anything that is on the chat, that would be great. I think we're moving on to our last bit of the event. So sorry for interrupting the conversation here. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you, and to Katerina as well for facilitating.
That was absolutely fantastic. Really great questions from the audience. Thanks so much. Really great facilitation and some fantastic answers. We are now going to hand over to our final speaker. We will then do a bit of a wrap up. So we'll play back some of those key tips that we've kind of learned throughout the event as well. But next, we've got not only, but also speaking. So Maddi and Guy will be taking over shortly. And they started not only, but also. It's here to open up the conversation on creative roles in order to generate new opportunities for young creatives looking for their first move. So it's really created to help make sure that people understand that maybe it's not just graphic design. If you've done a graphic design degree, there's lots of different things that you can get involved with, like service design. But I'll hand over to Guy and Maddi to tell you more.
So we don't have slides to share, and we'll try and keep it super short because we know that people want to enjoy the sun, a warm evening. But hi everyone, my name is Maddi, and my personal pronouns are she, her. I have ginger hair, I'm wearing glasses and a blue shirt, and I'm sat next to Guy.
Hi, I'm Guy. Use he, him pronouns, and I've got brown hair. I'm wearing a black and white stripy t-shirt.
And we are in our bedroom. There is not much to it. It's a blank white wall behind us. So as Charlie said, we both started in graphic design as graphic designers, also went to Kingston University. And well, I did, you didn't.
No.
Speaking for you. But we started in graphic design, and both of us had a realization that we loved creativity, loved design, loved solving problems, but our methods of doing that and what we actually enjoyed physically doing were quite different to just being a graphic designer. So I'm now working as a strategist, and Guy is...
Yeah, I'm a front-end developer.
Yeah, so we basically had we really went through that transition of one role straight, working our way into another. And as we were doing that, we realized that it was actually quite hard to figure out what our options were. We knew that design wasn't quite right, but we weren't really sure where we wanted to go. So we had to really explore our options and try and understand, is it service design? Is it strategy? Is it copywriting, project management, all of these other things? Where was right for us with the skill sets that we had and the interests that we had? And that kind of led us to setting up not only eventually once we've managed to transition, because it's a conversation that we found that a lot of people struggle with, and a lot of people are trying to work out and navigate, because there's loads of information about how to be an amazing graphic designer, how to build your portfolio, all of that kind of thing, but there isn't loads about some of these other spaces. So yeah, as Charlie said, not only, but also is really a platform to try and kind of shed some light on those other roles and those other spaces that you can go through, really cut out the jargon, start the conversation, and just shine a light on some of the amazing work that people are doing.
Yeah. So with it, what we're trying to do is really answer 3 questions, like what role exists. So I know when I was doing my degree in graphic design, I had no clue about what was out there in the industry. It was only years after, really, when I was working, that I found out about a lot of these roles. So good, who does them? So people's journeys into them, because I think that's really useful to add, like, if you know how other people have done it, then it can potentially help you on your way. Charlie actually has done a great interview on our website that you can go read about her journey into service design. And then how to get into it. So obviously attending events like this, and then anything from tips and advice, resources, mentoring, and answering questions, things like that.
Yeah, so those are just some of the things that we do and kind of an overview on us. But we thought it was worth sharing a couple of the other things we've learned. Obviously, we're not service designers. We know service designers, we speak to service designers, but ours are probably more general tips for whatever you're kind of interested in getting into. And some of them hopefully will help you guys as well. So I'll probably repeat a couple of things that other people have said because they are amazing tips and bits of advice. So they need saying again, but I'll be quite quick. So first off, definitely, absolutely, as has been mentioned, build that network. Those people skills are so important. It's helped me massively when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Exactly as we talked about earlier, speaking to people who are in those roles will really help you to understand what they actually do every day. I remember when I found out about strategy at first, I was like, what actually does that mean? What actually does that person do versus someone else? What's the difference between them? And that's really helpful to find that out. And then secondly, obviously from those conversations and from, for example, talks like this, you'll find a lot of resources and things. Dig into those and find out about them, but definitely work out which ones are the right way for you to learn. I know that I find reading large chunks of text quite difficult. So for me, the best way for me to learn is through action. So doing kind of practice projects, things like that, versus for someone else, a podcast might be a great way of learning. So absolutely look up some of the resources, but make sure that you don't feel that pressure to feel like you can't. If something feels overwhelming or complicated, that's okay. There'll be other resources, and it's just a case of looking for them. And then thirdly, a little bit on that point of kind of doing those sort of practice runs, there are some really great resources and websites that give you, for example, if you don't have a portfolio yet, or you have a portfolio but you want to practice some new tools and some new ideas, there are some great websites that give you sort of prompt briefs. So they're super brief, minimal information, so they allow you to be quite broad. So I'll drop a couple of those in the chat in a minute, but first off, one of those is sharpen.design. So that gives you briefs in the form of, for example, design a keychain for a X and try X, and it will give you kind of another tool. So sharpen.design. And then there's another one called briefs.biz. So briefs with a Z.biz. And again, for example, design a mobile app that lets people find tasty recipes. So that's just a prompt that will help you to come up with ideas. And there's a series of a couple of others that I'll drop into the chat. So if you don't have a portfolio, or if you feel like you want to just practice your skills, you can really kind of find these sort of initial briefs that will spark up your thinking, and kind of hopefully kick off a project for you that you can work on. And then another resource that's really helpful that I've actually used in the past for strategy, but I think, a lot of roles will need it, is for when you're workshopping. So there was brief mention of workshops previously earlier, but workshops can be in person, they can be remotely, you can work with lots of people, a small focus group, and really working out kind of useful workshop activities and ways to kind of tease out that information from people is really helpful. And there is a place called Hyper Island, and on their website, if you go to their website and then go to resources and then tools on the right hand side, there is toolbox and remote working toolbox. And within those, they run through a series of workshop activities, how to do them, what resources you'll need, and what you'll get out of them. And they've been really helpful for me in kind of managing to tease out questions, especially if you have a focus group where they're quite nervous and they're not really, very open to kind of giving you information. Being able to use kind of workshop activities is really, really helpful. So spoken really fast, but those are some useful resources, hopefully, that you will find useful. So some kind of initial brief launch pads, but also those kind of workshop activities if you're starting to think about workshops. So that's us in a quite speedy nutshell.
Very fast.
Yeah, very fast. Sorry if I've spoken too fast. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us, and hopefully some useful stuff. And just to finish off, obviously we are aiming to kind of continue this conversation and work with Charlie and the rest of the service lab team to really kind of develop this. And so if you are someone who is in the service design role and you would like to share more insights and any more information, or give us a bit of a conversation and carry on this conversation, then absolutely do reach out to us. We're more than happy to chat and hear from you and about your experiences. But also, if you're someone who's looking to get into it, these kinds of conversations and events are really important, and we want to kind of help encourage that even more. So if there are any particular questions that you want answering, then we can kind of help to facilitate that and encourage it. So also there. And also finally, we will be doing a little bit of a write-up that we will share with Charlie of some of the kind of top tips from this, so that there's also kind of a written accompaniment to the recording as well. So we will share that with Charlie so that hopefully it can be shared with you guys as well.
That was amazing. Thanks so much, Maddi and Guy. Big round of applause. I'm just going to open up very quickly to see if there are any initial questions, or if anyone wants to kind of jump in and say, yeah, I'd like to be part of not only, but also wants to get involved in interviewing. Jump into the chat now, or shout out if you want to.
It's always that awkward at the end where you're like, oh, is anybody going to say anything?
Almost didn't, because I was like, it's warm and we've given everyone a lot of tips.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you've definitely got a few people coming in already saying that they want to be involved. So keep those coming. Do shout if there is any questions. But we'll move us into a wrap up now and just talk through some of the kind of key things that we've learned. And then we'll let everyone get back on with their hot, sunny evening. So first of all, just a massive thank you to our huge plethora of speakers this evening, and a massive thank you to our facilitators as well. It's been a really fantastic event. It's been one of our biggest events with a lot of different speakers, but it was really lovely because we really kind of came together and kind of co-designed it, which was fantastic for Otla and I. First of all, this evening we heard from Safiya all about kind of period poverty, a fantastic digital campaign, fantastic Instagram filters, and a bit about what it's like to start your own design studio. So thanks again. From Jean, we heard fantastic tips about how to showcase a really extensive project in a portfolio, all about encouraging internal Thai tourism, really beautiful designs, fantastically put together. Thanks for taking us through that. From Lydia, Chloe and Morwenna, we saw a fantastic example of a really inclusive service design project that really looked to utilize some of those existing ecosystems with absolutely beautiful kind of graphics and design as well. Thanks so much for kind of showcasing some of your work. Maddi and Guy, thanks again for talking through some of those tips, really fantastic. And thanks for helping people to kind of see other people's journeys and being able to learn from them. It's a really fantastic resource that you've been pulling together, also amazingly designed. And to our panelists, Daniel, Amogh and Eve, thank you so much. So many tips that came out from that. Some of the things that kind of stood out around finding your dream role. We heard talk to lots of people, do lots of research, look for real life challenges within organizations and try and get yourself involved. And don't look for just service design roles, look for the kind of skill set. Service design gets banded as lots of different terminologies. So you have to be a bit of a detective sometimes and actually work out that's a bit of a service design role, but might be covered up as something else. Around tips for progression, we heard that progressing as a service designer is really about building service design mindsets, showcasing that value across an organization. It's completely normal to be having existential crises about what is service design. We've heard that it's a really good idea to get yourself involved with lots of kind of extra projects, volunteering as much as possible, especially when you're kind of in the early stages of a service design career. Also getting involved in events like this. We also heard that career coaches are really great to invest some time with, whether that's a formal or informal way of doing it. and then some fantastic portfolio tips as well, with some really good kind of diverse discussion there about the different ways and formats in which you might want to put your kind of portfolio together, and some great tips about really thinking about who's reading it, what context are they in, how much time have they got, but also don't focus so much on the design that you forget to really importantly be building up that network. So there's some brilliant resources that come through in the chat as well. As Maddi and Guy mentioned, they're very kindly going to be pulling together a blog post that will help to house some of these things. The video will also be live in a couple of weeks' time. So apologies for anyone that had any tech difficulties at the beginning, but you'll be able to kind of catch up on some of those tips then as well. And please reach out to our speakers if you want to get involved, not only, but also reach out to our speakers if you really like some of their work and want to work with them. We will share a bit more about our next event soon. And we are also still looking for someone to help join the Service Lab team. So if you fancy getting involved with Service Lab and joining Otla and I, please do get in touch. But that's it from us. As ever, do direct message us if there's anything that we can do to make Service Lab better. It's been fantastic to see so many people. Thanks for joining us on such a warm evening, and see you all again soon.